You know that feeling after you're done reading a book. You pat yourself on the shoulder for the accomplishment. You feel awesome because you learned so much and got so many insights that you could apply to your life. Weeks pass by and you pick up another book. You read it, you feel productive. You repeat it, never questioning what you actually applied to your real life. This is what I call the illusion of productivity consumption. 2 days ago, I catch myself doing this actually. I listened to a podcast from Dan Coe 2 days ago when I was just walking, and the whole podcast is actually 3 hours where he and his like successful friends sit down and talk about like their lives and everything. And I listened through the whole 3 hours, and at the end of the podcast, they said,
the worst thing someone could do is watch this full 3 hours and feel productive because of it and do nothing with it.
Yeah.
Because then might as well have wasted 3 hours.
Like, damn, have I actually been taking action on things I've learned on the internet? Or have I just been listening, feeling like I'm productive? And I've come to the conclusion that I read some books, I haven't taken any action. So I'm always thinking to myself, like, oh yeah, I'll remember this in the future. I will gather some things that I will store in my mind. So when we are consuming this type of content, like, we actually want to improve ourselves. But if we don't take the insights and wisdom and apply those to our real life, then it's like entertainment. And entertainment is not wrong in itself. But if you go into the intention of, oh, I want to learn something. I want to see if I can learn something here, and yeah, I want to improve my life. But then you never take action on the things they teach you. Then, like, what's the point? So how do we combat this? So the first step in order to solve this problem is actually to become aware. Just become aware when you are reading a book, or you'll be listening to a like 3-hour podcast. Ask yourself, like, what intention do I have before I read this book? Do I have the intention of, I want to learn something, I want to see what I can implement from this podcast or book into my life, and I'm gonna write it down? Or am I simply doing it because of I feel productive and good after it? So step number 2 is to write 3 things down from the media that you consume. After watching a like educational YouTube video, or listening to a podcast, or reading like a chapter of a book, take a piece of paper and write down 3 things about the podcast or book that you learned. You don't have to like read 5 minutes of a book and then, oh, what did I learn in those 3 things? No, it's like, if you're done listening to a podcast, then you can write out like 3 things I learned from this podcast that like stuck out to you, that resonated with you. And this is actually what they said in the podcast of Dan Coe, where he said,
write 10 takeaways from this.
if you want to build a habit, I think it's better to actually start with like 1 or maybe 2 or 3 things per video or per chapter that you've learned about, instead of picking out 10 things, because that's a lot. When you're building a habit, it's easier to start very small and then just build it up. So if 3 things is too much for you, just do 1, okay? Step 3 is, how can I take action on the things I wrote down? So I make an action point. So if I wrote down something, I try to make the thing that I wrote down an action point. So let's see what I wrote down from the Dan Coe podcast. One thing I wrote down was, write down 3 takeaways from the podcast I listened to that actually gives me advice or an idea that I could try. Realize I might need to learn how to put ideas into system, like building a second brain. Then I take that idea or something I wrote down, make it to action. The action is start learning and building a second brain and learn from YouTube. You can ask yourself, how can I take action on the insight I just got, or the insight I just wrote down? It doesn't need to be, oh, I need to do this grand thing. It could be like, that insight could spark an idea for, maybe I want to learn something on YouTube, or maybe I want to journal about a thought that came up to me when I wrote down this insight. The 4th thing you should do is set a timer and date for actually when you're actually gonna do it. When you're actually gonna do it, man. When are you gonna do it? So you have your insights, you have your action point. So if you take that action point and write down a date when you are gonna do it, which time you're gonna do it, and where are you gonna do it. This will take off the mind's memory of trying to memorize when you're gonna do it, because you might as well forget what you try to do. And I would say I put this into my Google Calendar, but to make it easy, to make it easier, just write down on a piece of paper. So take each action point and do the same thing. And now you have scheduled in like, oh, for half an hour I will sit down and journal about this idea. Or for half or maybe 10 minutes I will try to learn about how to solve a Rubik's Cube or something like that that sparked an idea or action that you wanted to do. So what have we learned today? What have we learned today, classmates? What have we learned today? Today we have learned to be aware of the illusion of consumption, or the problem of consuming and not taking action. Get into the habit of writing down what you learned from the podcast or book or anything that you learned from the YouTube or something. The third thing is make action points from the insights that you learned. And fourth, take those action points and set a time and date for them when you are gonna do it. And do it. Hope you take something out of this video and apply it to your life.